President Joe Biden declaring that January 9th will be a national day of mourning to remember the life and legacy of our 39th president. James Earl Carter Jr. was the longest-lived U.S. president when he died yesterday at 100 years old. Now, when his presidency ended with a humbling defeat to Ronald Reagan, Carter became a model for a post-presidential life, going on to win the Nobel Peace Prize and forging a path as a humanitarian. Carter was born in the small town of Plains, Georgia, back in 1924, going on to marry his wife, Rosalind, and the two of them were partners in the family business, which moved from peanuts to politics. He served two terms in the Georgia State Senate, and in 1970, he was elected governor. Carter was hardly a household name, but he won the Democratic presidential nomination and challenged incumbent Republican Gerald Ford. Americans were still angry about the Watergate scandal, and Carter made honesty a centerpiece of his campaign. Take a listen.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president. I would not tell a lie. I would not mislead the American people.
Now, Jimmy Carter scored a major political victory by brokering a key agreement to ensure stability in the Middle East. But the Iran hostage crisis and problems with fuel shortages and double-digit inflation loomed large over the last 2 years of his term. Now, people have been paying tribute to the former president at the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta, leaving behind flowers, peanuts, and messages at a memorial there. One note read simply, "We love you, President Carter." And the American flag is half-staff at the U.S. Capitol building and at federal buildings across the nation today. And the New York Stock Exchange observed a moment of silence for 1 minute today to honor the former president. We have correspondents standing by live from our nation's capital to West Palm Beach, Florida, and to his hometown of Plains, Georgia, to show us how people are remembering Carter's legacy today and paying tribute to the former president. Let's start with CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassmann live in Carter's hometown. Mark, Carter's life ended in that same town where it all began. How are the people of Plains, Georgia, remembering the former president today?
Well, this is interesting. I mean, Jimmy Carter was obviously a man whose name is known around the world. He's a former U.S. president who made a global impact both during his presidency and after his presidency. And yet here in Plains, this moment is being remembered and commemorated for what it is, a death in a small town. Jimmy Carter's several hundred Plains residents were his neighbors and his friends. They have known many of them, most of them have known the Carters for years. And so this is a community that for whom this moment feels very personal, very intimate. And they are mostly just families in Plains thinking about the Carters, their friends and neighbors.
Yeah, Mark, I heard this interesting anecdote today that Jimmy Carter, before his death, actually requested that the businesses in his town stay open so that they may benefit from the outpouring of support and people coming to honor the late president. What can you tell us about the tributes to Carter in Georgia and beyond across the country?
Well, it's been a remarkable outpouring of remembrance and of support for the Carter family. I mean, every living U.S. president has weighed in on what this moment has meant to him, what Jimmy Carter meant to America and meant to the world. They want, just like the folks who live here in Plains, everybody's public remembrances have included messages of support to the Carter family, because this is a very tough moment for them. Remember, Rosalind Carter died last year. Now Jimmy Carter dying yesterday. This is both a shock to the system and a personal moment again for so many people who either knew Jimmy Carter as they did here in Plains or felt as though they knew Jimmy Carter just as a former U.S. president and a global ambassador too.
He was beloved. And what are we hearing about plans for Carter's memorial next week?
Well, it's a little bit in flux, Liz. There are going to be a series of events over the next 10 days, both here in Georgia, mostly in Atlanta, and then in Washington, D.C. He will eventually lie in state at the U.S. Capitol, and then there will be a funeral service for him on January 9th. That is the only official date that has been confirmed yet. That was confirmed by the White House. But in general, you're going to see a series of remembrances for Jimmy Carter in the next 10 days or so.
All right, CBS News senior national correspondent Mark Strassmann. Thank you so much, Mark. Now, unpacking Carter's legacy is pretty complicated, and a defining moment was the Iran hostage crisis. In 1979, Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy and took dozens of Americans hostage. Now, initially, the public rallied behind Jimmy Carter as the White House strategized to free them. But the longer it took, the tide turned against him. And in 2020, Carter sat down with 60 Minutes correspondent Lesley Stahl and talked about why the crisis dragged on for over 400 days.
If you had done some kind of a military action early on,
they would have all been dead. We had a rescue operation, as you know, in April of 1980.
This was a major disaster.
Well, it was carefully planned. It had every prospect of being successful. It was approved by all of our military leaders as being, what I just said, carefully planned and good chance of success. And we were stricken with unpredictable problems with our helicopters.
You have actually said that you think you would have been reelected if you had sent one more helicopter.
Yeah, we would have gotten the hostages back home in April of 1980. I think it would have been a heroic and a very attractive political event, and I would, without a doubt, have been reelected.
All right, let's go now to CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa. Robert, thank you for being with us. This crisis was really a defining moment for Carter's presidency, wasn't it?
It was, and it was such a tough moment, not just for the country, but for Carter and his inner circle. While serving as president, they were burdened by this hostage crisis. It had overwhelmed what he was trying to do on foreign policy and domestic policy, and it became this incessant struggle to try to get these hostages back. And when the rescue attempt failed, it really made it difficult for Carter, and it created an opening for then former Governor Ronald Reagan of California to offer some kind of new style of leadership. Carter had been seen as someone who was tough, was a former submarine officer in the U.S. Navy, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. But when the hostages just couldn't be released under his watch, it created that gap in the public's estimation of him, especially as they considered a second term.
And Robert, the Iranian Revolution really triggered the oil crisis that plagued Carter's presidency as well. Some people might remember the pictures of those long lines at the gas stations back in 1979. And Carter also struggled to control inflation, a problem that's really the forefront today for the Biden administration.
There are so many similarities between some of the struggles of the 1970s and now in terms of how the country sometimes feel like it's in a funk post the pandemic, and people still feel a little bit of the hangover effect of that pandemic. And Carter dealt with his own view of national negativity. He gave a famous speech during his presidency, some would say infamous, where he started to reflect on the state of the country and worried that the country was not really having the energy and vitality he wanted to see as it dealt with all of these tumultuous events abroad and economic pain at home.
And it's important to note that Jimmy Carter accomplished a lot during his presidency, and one of his most significant and probably enduring political achievements was negotiating the Camp David Accords. That was a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel that really reshaped the Middle East at the time. And that agreement has survived for almost half a century, even to this day, with the ties very strained over the war in Gaza. He has a complicated relationship, though, with history, or a complicated relationship with Israel, I should say. And after leaving office, he changed his tone about the Israeli government. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, he has been highly critical of different Israeli prime ministers and Israeli governments over the years since he left the presidency in 1981. He would like to see a different kind of resolution. He labored to try to have Israel and the Palestinians come to a new kind of agreement. He was often criticized by some supporters of Israel for how he characterized his position. But what's notable about what he did at Camp David is he did bring Israel and Egypt together at Camp David to have a breakdown of the tensions. And that was a testament to Carter's leadership style, his personal faith as an evangelical Christian, to be a broker, someone who could have this gentle but firm approach to both of these respective leaders. And that was, perhaps, as we look back, one of the most groundbreaking moments of his presidency. That was the culmination of so many aspects of President Carter's character, that he was this outsider who could be the one to bring these people to the table, who could find a way to get a consensus. Of course, the Middle East remains a vexing problem for American presidents to this day, but Carter certainly tried to make an effort.
All right. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to see you. And President Biden and Jimmy Carter had a relationship that lasted nearly 50 years and was actually the first U.S. senator to endorse Carter's presidential bid. Yesterday, Joe Biden called Carter a remarkable leader, humanitarian, and dear friend.
Today's world, some look at Jimmy Carter and see a man of a bygone era. With honesty and character, faith and humility, it mattered. But I don't believe it's a bygone era. I see a man not only of our times, but for all times. Someone who embodied the most fundamental human values we can never let slip away. And what Jimmy Carter is an example of is just simple decency. Simple decency. And I think that's what the rest of the world looks to America for.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now. Now, Ed, we've seen some people strike comparisons between Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden's presidential terms. Are you seeing those comparisons?
Well, it had been talked about, and certainly Republicans had gone to great lengths to compare the two, and I suppose they're similar in the sense that they both served one term reluctantly, and Biden would certainly associate himself with the decency that he's been calling out since Carter's death. The idea that someone can believe that anyone is a decent person and that all Americans, all people of the world, deserve help and deserve love. And you will hear the president at the state funeral for Carter in the coming days eulogize him. He said a few years ago that Carter had asked him to do so, and as the sitting president, typically they do eulogize their predecessor. The two of them, of course, go back, as you mentioned earlier, almost 6 decades, Biden being the first U.S. senator and the youngest senator at the time to endorse Carter's improbable White House bid. Carter never forgot that. The two remained close, not only during the Carter administration, but in the years after that. And Biden called out the fact that when his son Beau Biden died a few years ago, the Carters were especially concerned and close with the Biden family, ensuring they were okay. They had kept in touch in recent years as much as someone could with Carter. They visited him in Plains, Georgia a few years ago. But Biden certainly would associate himself with a few aspects of that presidency. Again, the decency afforded to anyone, the focus on global diplomacy, trying to avoid armed conflict, and work to shore up the domestic economy despite some real headwinds with inflation, which of course was an issue for President Biden as well.
And Ed, you join us from West Palm Beach, Florida, which is just outside Mar-a-Lago there. What reaction are we seeing from President-elect Donald Trump?
So far, pretty effusive praise, Elizabeth. He pointed out that while he strongly disagreed with Carter, he credited the late president for, quote, working hard to make America a better place, and for that I give him my highest respect. We don't know yet for certain that Trump will attend the state funeral next week or any of the other ceremonies in Washington. We're expecting, for example, he'll lie in state the day before that state funeral. But in keeping with tradition, Trump and presumably Mrs. Trump would be in attendance along with the other former presidents. Trump remains here at his home in Mar-a-Lago, as you mentioned, enjoying the second of the holiday weeks. And we're not expecting to see much of him this week, possibly tomorrow for New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago.
And Ed, before we go, I want to make sure we mention this. We're seeing that Trump is endorsing Mike Johnson in the House Speaker race ahead of a very critical vote there. What can you tell us about that endorsement?
Yeah, in a pretty lengthy statement on his Truth Social platform earlier this morning, the former president added at the end that he gives Johnson his total endorsement. That's critical to Mike Johnson as he tries to shore up support among the narrowly divided House of Representatives, which convenes formally on Friday. Johnson needs to win a majority of all members, and there are a handful of Republican members who are withholding support at this hour, which could mean conceivably Johnson fails to win the requisite support to stay on as Speaker. We know there are conversations ongoing with a handful of Republicans who have various concerns, but with the former President-elect's endorsement, Johnson hopes that's enough to pressure House Republicans to come on board. Remember, however, 38 of them voted against that short-term spending plan that Trump had initially asked for, a sign that he doesn't have total sway over the caucus. But the other point that Trump and Johnson and other Republicans will be making is you need to have a speaker in place by the end of Friday, ahead of Monday's certification of the Electoral College. Of course, Monday is January 6th, which, according to the Constitution, is the day Congress is supposed to certify those results, but the House needs a speaker before that can happen. Could be a bumpy few days for Republicans in Washington.
Could be even over the holiday. All right, CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Thanks so much, Ed. And we will be bringing you more from Jimmy Carter's life throughout the show today. Before we head to break, we want to take you back to 2018. Well, CBS Evening News managing editor and anchor Norah O'Donnell sat down with Carter, and they discussed what he thought about his legacy. Watch.
How do you want to be remembered?
Well, but my family, I hope I could be remembered as a good great-grandfather and a good grandfather and a good father. By my wife, I hope I could be remembered as a good husband. But in politics, as a champion of peace and human rights, I was lucky enough to keep our country at peace for the 4 years that I served. And we were, I think, looked upon as a champion of human rights then. So that's the two things I guess politically speaking of it, I'm proud of.